Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reality. My name is William. I'm here with Lev. How are you doing, Lev?
Hi, everyone.
Today, we're going to talk about space tourism. We did an episode before on SpaceX and their first launch of a crew into space on their Falcon 9 rocket. But since then, there have been several launches into space by different companies now. So we thought it was an appropriate time to talk about space tourism and the future of human flight into outer space.
Well, we're thinking of mostly SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, and Blue Origin. That's the context we're thinking about here. The recent rocket private companies.
Right. And why don't we just jump into it and start talking about each company? SpaceX is probably the most developed company of the three we're going to discuss. They've actually sent passengers into orbit. The other two, Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin, have only reached suborbital space. So SpaceX is advancing the mission, and they actually sent people to the International Space Station. So they're on track for transporting astronauts to space stations, as well as getting regular civilians into orbit. Just recently, they sent 4 civilians into orbit for a few days, and that was in September. I think it was September 16th. So that's pretty exciting. What do you think about SpaceX, Lev?
Well, what I think of is just the artistic potential and scientific. When I say artistic, I mean like making movies in space or art, paintings, the ways that space can inspire art, which is really a new thing. I mean, it takes the perspective of doing things in space, not just for science. It's like a philosophical achievement, like to expand the aesthetic values of mankind. That's what I see in it.
Yeah, it's interesting that this can provide a new perspective for just your average artist or working person. Um, but right now, it seems like tickets are pretty costly. So
Yeah,
right now, it's mostly millionaires or people who win competitions. They get to go up, and it doesn't look like the ticket price is going to drop anytime soon. For SpaceX, it's in the millions because they get into orbit. And for Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin, I believe it's hundreds of thousands of dollars for a ticket.
hmm
Um, I read a figure that Virgin Galactic actually bumped up the price to $450,000 per ticket.
yeah,
They're pretty ambitious. They're trying to do like flights every day, and at multiple spaceports. So, but you were talking about artists, and SpaceX sent somebody named Dr. Proctor. I think her name is Cyan Proctor. She's
yeah.
um, some sort of scientist. I forget what her specialization is, but she did some art. She went up and she made some art, and I think you can actually buy her art
Yeah.
online in the form of postcards or something like that.
Well, yeah,
There's also, of course, Tom Cruise.
yeah. I think that's more a rumor that he would make a movie, but it would make sense that he would. I mean, someone should. I mean, that seems to be the entire point. Like, if you want to do something like space tourism or something human advancing, art would be part of that. It seems like that would be necessary.
So there's a Russian company that's making a film already in space, and I think they're on the space station right now doing
Yeah.
it. Um, and then of course Tom Cruise, has plans or something to go up in a space tech ship
Yeah.
and go to the space station as well. Also, who was it? It was Blue Origin sent up William Shatner recently, and he of course is the actor from Star Trek, and he gave a pretty emotional speech after he landed, after coming back from space. So that's kind of exciting that we sent Captain Kirk up into space. Did you happen to catch his speech?
I didn't.
It was kind of touching, and he said he was like had a problem coming up with words, which is typical when you experience something like life changing, I guess. But I encourage people to go and watch his speech because he did a good job, talking about it. And he, of course, is an actor, so he's very good at speaking and very eloquent.
Yeah.
Um, what else do you have to say about SpaceX? Any other
Well,
ideas?
it makes me think about like we've been going to space for decades and decades. It's hard to find new value in it. So it's almost like a renewal of interest, I would say, that a person funded a company and individuals can go up. It just changes what you think about. It's not like there's only one purpose. It depends on the creativity of anyone going up. There's more potential than in the past.
Yeah, I think when we start getting more and more people up in space, then you'll increase that potential because people are full of their own creative ideas, and so you never know what someone might be inspired to do after going up into space.
Yeah.
Um, Now, Elon Musk, his inspiration is to get to Mars, of course. And he's the owner of SpaceX, or the CEO, and he wants to get people to Mars by 2026. That seems like he might be able to do it. I mean, he's proven that he can get to the space station. Um, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on tourism to Mars?
Um, that seems like decades away. I mean, you have to give like 2 years of your life for that. And it's dangerous. And well, it's just a little payoff, I think, just to either you stay forever or you come back in like 3 years.
Yeah, I think his goal though is to have reusable rockets that can come back.
True.
So I guess he's planning on, bringing people back from Mars as well.
Yeah.
Um, I don't really know how that would work, but I guess scientists are figuring it out. Um, the other issue with SpaceX is how much this costs. So they don't really release figures on how much they've spent, but I guess there's been some estimates, and they figure it'll cost, or maybe Elon Musk estimated that it would cost $5 billion to finish the Starship
Mm,
program.
yeah.
Um, so, and then NASA gave them a contract for $3 billion, I think. And so much of their work is going to be transporting stuff for NASA into space and taking people to the space station. So this
Yeah.
kind of relates to the partnership, with the government, public-private partnership. Um, and we can get into that after we're done with Virgin Galactic. But I just thought it'd be interesting to mention, since SpaceX got so much money from the government, it basically, if it's going to cost $5 billion to complete the Starship program, well, they've already got $3 billion from NASA. So it's like they kind of really dependent on the government and what the U.S. did in prior decades to establish infrastructure and a system to get to space.
In a way that's unavoidable. It's the way that space exploration works. I mean, just the way it's been structured for many decades. I mean, I guess you could break out of it, but it doesn't seem to be the worst. I don't know about alternatives. In a short time, they get to change the entire structure pretty quickly.
Before we had multiple billionaires in America, it seems like it would have been a very challenging project for a private enterprise to get to space. So it's kind of, I guess, necessary for government to do it, since they can tax people and use that money for these programs. I'm just wondering if, since SpaceX is so dependent on NASA contracts, is that a problem for future profitability? Is this just like a money drain? Are they really gonna get a bunch of people to pay for these tickets to Mars or tickets to space, and get enough people to make the company profitable?
Well, that's inherent in all government funding, whether or not it's like, in a way, the government is a service. By definition, it only costs. It never makes profit. That's not the point of it. So there will be a whole economic hole in it, just by nature.
Ultimately, I guess the goal should be private space stations, which
Yeah,
is something that Blue Origin is working on.
that makes sense.
Because if you can get government out of the space industry completely, then it would just be private companies, and you wouldn't have taxpayer money paying for this.
Yeah, that's probably the way out. Like, to create a alternative funding source, which would be tourism, basically. To have that space station, to get extra funds outside of the government through voluntary exchange. That would be the ideal. And that's the way to start.
All right. So, do you want to talk about Blue Origin or Virgin Galactic first?
Blue Origin.
Right. So, Blue Origin, they're owned by Jeff Bezos. Now, this is an interesting company because Jeff Bezos, in the case of SpaceX, they launch out of a government facility, Kennedy Space Center. But Jeff Bezos, he owns the property, the launch site 1, which is in West Texas. So he's more privatized, I guess. He owns the launch site, he owns the company. He's trying to create a private space station by 2030. So I think that has more potential for getting us off government funded space program.
Yeah. It doesn't seem to get as much attention as the other companies. I'm not sure why exactly. It doesn't seem to be as big, but I don't know why. It's just publicity, I guess.
Maybe it's the shape of his rocket.
That too. It's hilarious.
But he did send William Shatner into space, as we said. So other than the space station, I don't know what his long range plans are. I guess just to send more people into space.
Doesn't seem there's like a visionary involved. I mean, like Jeff Bezos, fine, but he's not really a visionary for space. I mean, okay, he funds it, but there's no like driving individual. SpaceX kind of. Musk is pretty strong-minded, but still not necessarily the true visionary yet. He's a tech guy, not really space so much. Same with Richard Branson, but he's not as dynamic, I think.
I guess once he gets the space station up and running, that would be
Yeah,
his big thing.
yeah.
And you could send citizens up for long duration stays. All right, well, let's move on to Virgin Galactic then. So this is Richard Branson's company, and his method of getting to space is a little different than SpaceX and Blue Origin. SpaceX and Blue Origin used, a very powerful rocket to launch people into space. And Richard Branson uses a plane, and his spaceship is attached to the plane. So the normal big plane, mothership, I think he calls it, carries the rocket ship up to an altitude of something like 45,000 feet, or what is it, 45? Anyway, he carries it up very high, close to the edge of space, and then the rocket ship launches and goes up the rest of the way into space. And that's a different method, and he seems to be able to, or he thinks he can do this like once a day in multiple spaceports
Hmm.
and get $450,000 per ticket. What do you think of that? You think he's going to manage that?
Sounds complicated. Doesn't sound efficient. It's neat, but it just sounds weird. There's not much more to say. I think it's just excessive, I think. I'm not sure if that's creative enough. It's not a real solution. It's just brute forcing almost. Just fly already and fly higher. That seems like his idea. Doesn't seem very great.
I think he's trying to find a way to make money off of it. I've read estimates that he spent $1 billion roughly, on this program. So he's got to, and if he wants to make $1 billion a year or something like that, then he's got to charge these prices and do flights every day. So it's going to be quite an effort to make money off of this. And since he's got the two ships, so that's, he's got to make a bunch of motherships and a bunch of rocket ships if he's going to go out of different spaceports. But he did launch. He did get 2 pilots and the 4 passengers into space on July 11th. So that was exciting. But then I read later that there was a problem that we didn't learn about during the live event. Apparently, there was a warning light that went off, and it was a red warning light indicating that they weren't angled right to go into space in order to then come down and stay in the authorized landing zone. So they went out of that zone, and the FAA had a problem with them, and they grounded Virgin Galactic for a while.
Yeah.
So then I guess they resolved it, and the FAA just decided to give them a larger leeway for their landing zone or airspace. So I guess they have a few things to work out. They've got to deal with the FAA issues, and they've got to figure out how to get all these flights up and running.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's just going to be draining money.
Yeah. How good are their engineers? I mean, that's the real question. Like SpaceX seems to have a lot of really good engineers. Like I can't tell about the personnel of these companies.
Yeah. One thing I liked about Richard Branson's vision is he wants to create all these like activities to do in space.
Yeah.
So I guess he has plans for improving the interior of the spaceship, so you can do a bunch of like, games.
Yeah. Well, that would be cool for sure. Especially
And in terms-
sightseeing.
Yeah. Yeah, like having like ideally you want to have lots of windows.
Yeah,
How big you can make the windows.
yeah,
Uh, but if it's a sightseeing tour, then you want to be able to see.
yeah.
So
The Earth rise and the moon rise. You'll never be
yeah,
able to
especially
see
if
it
he
any
gets,
other way.
um, oh sorry, especially if he gets them into like orbit. But I don't know if he plans to do that.
Hmm.
Now he's just doing the suborbital thing.
It sounds boring. It better be like straight up like space station. Otherwise, I see no point.
Yeah, I mean, I realize it's the early stages of space tourism, so pioneers are going to be paying a lot of money and taking a lot of risks to to do this activity. Um, but for like, if he wants to, they keep talking about sending like average people up, and I don't. They're not really sending average people up unless you win a competition. The
Yeah,
average person can't afford a $450,000 ticket for like a 15 minutes in space. Uh, you can just watch a video. You know, we've got
yeah.
tons of videos on YouTube of people in space. Uh, well, in terms of his relationship with the public sector, uh, I think so. The Spaceport America, where he launches out of in New Mexico, that was designed and built and owned by the state of New Mexico. So he's in that regard, he relies on you know public property, public infrastructure, um, and so he's got a 20-year lease with them. So it looks like he's going to be staying in New Mexico and working out of there for a long time. Do you think that long range Richard Branson's going to have much success with his plane version of getting this?
No, not at all. He's really just a music producer. He doesn't know this stuff. He doesn't think the right way. His mind isn't in that mode. Like at least even with Elon Musk, even if he doesn't design all this stuff, he's just an owner. At least he gets the concept of engineering, solving engineering problems. His mind is in the right place. The people he hires follow that philosophy and the quality of his engineers. So, all in all, I think Musk is going to do the best of these three guys.
Seems like Virgin Galactic is is relying on like a, a lesser desire to go into space. Like you just kind of want to like touch space and then leave.
Yeah,
It's not. It doesn't seem like uh, a long term project. Like you're gonna run out of these types of people. Like if you want to go into space, you want to stay there for a while.
yeah,
Um, like people in the early days, people didn't want to cross the ocean and just touch North America and come back. It seems kind of strange to me. I guess space is a little different because it's harder to get there. Takes more effort.
I'm
But
not sure
I
about
don't
that.
know.
I'm not actually sure about that. Does it really take more effort to get to space than it was to get to North America from Spain? I don't think so, actually. Even with cost, those boats cost a lot, and nobody knew where they were going, and medicine was terrible. There's basically no prep. And once you get there, most of them had no idea what to do. So, in a way, this is even better than those times. People are better prepared, have protocols, have safety protocols. have long-term vision, know what they're doing.
Well, that could be a whole show, I guess itself.
Yes,
Um, Speaking in terms of just the science and technology and knowledge required to get to space, I think that there's more required in that context.
sure.
But in terms of cost, yeah, maybe it's comparable. Cost in terms of just money and lives and time and effort, yeah, I mean, crossing the ocean was pretty difficult. Um, what about So we've talked about the goals. So SpaceX wants to get to Mars. Um, and we talked about the duration. So SpaceX seems to be beating these other companies in just terms of like the loftiness of their goals and the amount of time they offer in space. Um, they're already sending people to the space station. We talked about artists. So there's a aesthetic value going to space. I'm not too convinced about the whole aesthetic value
Yeah.
because when you go up into space, it seems like you get this perspective of Earth that you haven't had except in pictures before. But I mean, what are you really going to like learn, aesthetically?
Um, I don't think much, but I think it could spur aesthetic movements, like a new aesthetic movement, like neo-romanticism, perhaps. That's what I'm thinking of. A new perspective to art and its purpose.
It depends on what your view of art is, I guess.
True.
You could send some postmodern up and he'll just have a black canvas with dots of white on it and say, hey, this was inspired by space. uh, it could be really great or it could be really bad based on whoever the artist is. um, but if they say when you go up into space you get this new perspective, like we're all one living on this one planet and we should all come together and love each other and realize, that our differences are meaningless and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I think that I don't think that perspective comes from going into space. I think they're applying some universal theory or philosophy they had, or even like social
Yeah.
philosophy they had, and applying it to their trip to space. Basically, we already knew that we're all living on this one planet, in the middle of the solar system. When like Magellan traveled around the globe, like he proved something, and there was like this revelation to a lot of people. And when explorers travel the globe and they discover some new island or land, they figure something else out, and then you get a new knowledge about that place or the place you live. But when you go to space, you already knew that you were on a planet and there's stars out there and there's no air out there. You already basically know these things. I guess I'm not so hyped up about the artistic
Well, I think
value.
there's potential. Really depends. If people take advantage of it, it has to be very deliberate. People have to recognize the potential, the way that we might think about the purpose of life, the meaning of life, and that could be influenced by these weird, strange new achievements that otherwise, in decades ago, didn't even exist. But we'll have to see. That's a big if. It could be go anywhere.
What I'm really excited about are the zero G games.
Yes.
I want to send athletes into space, or anyone into space who can play the whatever games they come up with, and then they can broadcast these games, and you can watch people trying to play some game in zero G.
Yeah,
That'd be exciting.
yeah. Totally new games, totally new ideas. That would be exciting.
I guess you could have all kinds of different activities. Eventually, we're going to have zero G pornography, of course. So
Yep,
that's coming. Yeah, go
as for
ahead.
the games, it's like Ender's Game. I mean, anyone who read that, they have a zero G game in there. It's pretty cool.
It'll probably be at first. It'll probably be some game we have on Earth.
Yeah.
They'll be trying to play basketball in space or something. Well, real quickly, I want to address some of the risk factors because, of course, it's very dangerous to climb into a rocket and launch into space. As we know, accidents happen, and you have to assess the risk versus reward. Um, there's also the limit to the spaceship, and that might prevent it from becoming profitable, or taking more people. Do you have any thoughts on this angle?
Mm, I just think that risk is primarily the one setback, the one difficult thing to overcome. Risk in terms of human lives, that is, not risk in cost or infrastructure, but people, human life.
Yeah, of course, risk is inherent in life, and you have to take risks
Right?
in order to achieve things. So I don't know. I think people who are willing to spend all this money in order to get to space, obviously, there's some value in their achievement, and some bravery. It takes a lot of bravery to do something like that, and the thrill of the adventure is quite enticing. So I know. I mean, I've taken lesser risks in my life, doing like crazy hiking in the mountains, and just scrambling up canyons and climbing up waterfalls and stuff. So you kind of get into this mode where you want to you want to take a certain amount of risk in order to achieve something that you haven't done before, and
Mhm.
that makes you feel like you're accomplished, and you know what your limits are. You want to get to your limit without dying, and figure out what your abilities are. So I imagine if you're an engineer or something, this is quite an achievement, is to get a rocket into space, and just, and SpaceX sent passengers on an like, there were no real pilots manning the spaceship. They just sent four
Yeah,
people up. It was like fully automatized.
it's
Um,
cool stuff.
there was a pilot up there, but I don't think he did much. It seems like they're reducing the risk very much. It's like gotten to the point now where you don't even need a pilot to
Yeah,
pilot the spaceship. It can all be done remotely.
which is incredible, I find. I mean, they haven't been doing it that long. A year, I guess, or less.
I think the
Less.
SpaceX sent their first passengers up last year.
Yeah,
I feel like there's a lot to explore in terms of how they're reducing the risk. I think
yeah,
so when you had the Apollo program, you had to rely on the astronaut to solve all the problems on board.
yeah,
Um, but now it seems like they've gotten to the point where they can do a lot of that remotely. But I guess if there's a critical failure, you're still going to have to rely on somebody inside the ship to fix them,
Absolutely.
or maybe send up another ship to help them out. So I don't know. I hope nothing goes wrong, but it seems like when you automatize something like that, and then you send people up with lesser qualifications, you take on more risk. So
Yeah, but I would need to look on how they develop those methods. I mean, it might be sufficient to have the pilot there, but automate everything else. Or you could take immediate control if anything happens, which should be the protocol for now.
ideally, I guess you want a ship that can just fly itself. Like even if there's no commands coming from Earth, it could just get itself down.
Yeah,
So in terms of the vehicles, we talked about, okay, so Virgin Galactic is very limited. It only goes up, just barely gets into space, and then has to come down. It seems like so Blue Origin, their vehicle right now just goes up into space and then comes down real quick. But it seems like since it's a rocket, they're kind of building up to the point where they can get into orbit. Seems like that's kind of what you need in order to get into orbit is a big, powerful rocket.
yeah.
And of course, SpaceX has already gotten into orbit. So, do you think there are any? Well, do you think it would ever be possible to create like just a spaceship that can go into like a plane, not a rocket, that can get into space? And you know how they have in movies, like Star Trek or whatever, where there's this ship that can
Yeah,
launch from land and then just zoom up into space.
I would say space elevator makes the most sense. Just to have a wire that goes from the ground to outer space and orbits like an asteroid. I think that's the most cost effective, even though the first one would cost a ridiculous amount. But once you make it, it's just go up and down. There's no fuel needed, at least not for a rocket anyway.
So there would be like a comet or asteroid, I mean?
Well, the idea of a space elevator is that there's an object that orbits the Earth and it extends all the way to the ground, from space to the ground. So it's like however many miles long and goes stretches. And you just ride it up. It's in a sci-fi book by Arthur C. Clarke. No one's tried it, but it could work. But the problem is the materials. But that's an alternative to a rocket.
All right, so it wouldn't be like a spaceship though.
No.
It just you'd ride up, kind of like you'd ride up on a cable ride up a mountain or something.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's all I got for now. Do you have
Yeah.
any thoughts?
I think that's all you even have to say. There's so much to consider and imagine. But that's pretty much all the concrete stuff.
Yeah, I just think that space tourism in general is one of the most exciting things we've got going on right now.
Yeah.
If they can get a hotel or some sort of commercial space station up and running, that would be really exciting. And then you'd make a lot of money off of that, I think, because then people would pay a lot more money to go up and stay in the space station.
Yeah.
So I guess that's it. And we'll be keeping an eye on this topic and maybe we'll talk about it again in the future.
We probably will.
Thank you very much. And I'll talk to you next time.
It's a good conversation. Bye, everyone.